Through enhancements we have made to the financing capabilities of ARGUS EstateMaster DF and DM, you can now forecast the funding requirements and performance of each stage of a project more accurately with stage-by-stage financing. When the facility limit on a loan is set to a percentage of a project component, such as land costs, construction costs, or the value of pre-sales, a new preference setting will be enabled, allowing you to indicate whether it applies to the entire project or to a specific stage. If a specific stage is selected for that loan, it will impact the model in two ways. The facility limit will be based on the costs or revenues that have been allocated to that stage, rather than the whole project. And any interest and fees charged on that loan will be automatically allocated to that stage for the purpose of reporting on the stage cash flow and stage summary reports, rather than spread across all stages. We have introduced two customizable cost groups within the financing functionality to provide greater control over how your project loans draw down funds. These allow you to define what costs are included in that group and therefore what costs a loan specifically needs to fund. Once they are defined, they can be selected just like any other facility limit and loan ratio setting for each loan. These new cost groups will be in addition to the hard costs grouping, which will also be extended to include selling costs, pre-sale commissions, and leasing costs as selectable options. We have recognised that repayments to lenders and investors do not always follow a straightforward sequential process, and having to manually calculate workarounds isn't ideal. This is why we have now incorporated a new preference that allows you to define the repayment order of loans, overriding their default behaviour. For example, if you want to switch the order in which your loans are being repaid, you can do so with a simple change of a setting in the financing preferences. You can also configure two loans to have the same repayment order and have them repaid at the same time, either proportionally or equally 50-50. We have extended an existing preference setting that allowed interest to be paid by equity to now allow it to be paid for by any loan facility. The same functionality has also been incorporated into loan fees, which previously had always been capitalized. Once you indicate that interest or fees are paid for by another loan, they will be reported separately on the cash flow. We have introduced two new options to determine how the handover value is calculated between the development and investment phases of a build-to-rent project. These are target development margin and target yield. If the target yield option is selected, you will be prompted to select which operational year you wish to base it on, as well as the cost and revenue inclusions for the yield calculation. You can now have better insights into the performance of a build-to-rent project during its operational phase through two new KPIs that have been included on the BTR summary report. The running annual yield will help you measure the future income potential of the investment, while the running capitalized value will help you identify optimal timeframes for disposal. You can now appraise commercial developments with more confidence by modelling lease incentive structures that are in line with market best practice. A new preference setting allows you to decide whether incentives are entered as a separate rent-free period and fit-out cost, or alternatively modelled based on a percentage of rent. If the former is selected, it will allow you to model incentives the same way as it has been in the past. However, a new span input field has been added to the tenancy schedule to allow you to control the apportionment of the fit-out cost in the cash flow. If the latter is selected, you can then decide if the percentage is based on gross or net rent and how that percentage is allocated between a lump sum amount paid at the start of the lease, a rent-free allowance, and a rebate amount apportioned evenly over the term of the lease. You will then have the option to apply a different incentive percentage for each tenant. Outgoings don't necessarily escalate at the same rate as rental income, so to recognise this, we have given you greater control over how escalation can be applied to these expenses. You still have the option to leave how outgoings escalated previously and align them to rental income growth, or you can decide to escalate them differently based on an annual profile. Once you set up the escalation profile with annual percentage rates, you then have the additional flexibility of toggling escalation on and off for each outgoings item. You now have full control over how your project contingency is calculated. The new preference allows you to decide which specific project costs are included when a percentage contingency rate is adopted, and if those costs include or exclude tax. This removes the need to write your own formula, as the flexibility to decide what or what isn't included is now in your hands. A few improvements have also been made to the ARGUS EstateMaster DF and DM reports, offering additional insights into how your projects are performing, as well as giving you greater control of what is reported. A stock summary chart has been added, graphically displaying the stock that has been sold and settled over time. The stage cash flow and summary reports have been updated to ensure tax is now being automatically allocated to its stage, rather than assumed to be a global cost that needs to be allocated manually. In ARGUS EstateMaster DF, you can now decide whether or not the residual values are calculated and displayed throughout the model, including on the summary and consolidate reports, the dashboard, and the sensitivity analysis. This not only allows you to customize your reporting further, but also significantly improves the performance of the model if that analysis is not required for your project.